Have you ever been drawing one of the most beautiful, perfect pictures? Maybe the most perfect person you've ever drawn, like you see here? And then all of a sudden, you get halfway done and you just realize I don't know how long the legs are, how long the arms are, and where does this go versus that? Well, in today's video, we're going to figure all that out. So to make a video about full body proportions, I couldn't just do male or female. I kind of had to do both because there is a difference in proportions. Now, a couple things before we get started. What is this gap in the middle? Well, of course, that is space for Jesus, and don't you forget it. Now, next, if you're noticing these high-tech censor bars, well, I am monetized now, and I do have to play a little more by YouTube's rules, but we can have more fun with this. In fact, a special friend of mine has been wanting to help out a little more with my videos, so I think this might be the perfect moment. Flower, get in here. Now that's what I call the perfect ideal figure. So one of the most common ways to break down the proportions of a full figure is to use the head size as a measuring guide for the body. So like I said, there are some differences here between male and female, so for now, let's throw off the female and we're going to focus on the male. Alright, we're starting with the male first because the male is kind of the easiest when it comes to an exact number of proportions. So one thing we do really need though, is the ability to take off this figure's head and use it as a unit of measurement. The only problem is the figure's head is attached. Oh, hey Flower, what are you? You look like you're hiding something behind your back. Oh, it's just a knife, how cute. A knife? Flower, don't cut the camera! Well, I don't approve of his methods, but I got the head. Okay, so jokes aside, if we move this head over, we can now use this head as a unit of measurement. With a male figure, you're going to have an average of 8 heads tall. So as you guys can see, I have 8 heads stacked here, and that is just as tall as my figure. Now, these don't just mean that you stack 8 heads and you have a figure, they actually line up with certain points of the body. So as you guys can see here with this grid, you can see that these lines are all crossing through the body in certain points. Now, these aren't just random points. These are what we call landmarks, and there's something that we use to kind of get an accurate depiction of where things should be in our figure. So very quickly, let's go through the list, and forgive me if some of this seems very obvious. I just want to be very straight and to the point. The first two we have is the top of the head, of course, and the chin. Now, these are the 2 points that we already know. We're using the heads as a measurement. Everything else is going to be our landmarks. If we look over at the backside, the chin line is also going to be known as the bottom of the neck and the start of the shoulder from the back. Now, the next head line down is our nipple line. You'll hear some people refer to this as the chest line, but realistically, this is usually cuts through the nipple, and then the chest, the pectoral muscle itself, is usually finished below it. So I don't like to confuse it like that. I just call it straight up the nipple line. From the back, we're seeing the bottom of the scapula sometimes. It doesn't exactly line up with the bottom. Here on the male figure, you can see that I had the scapulas go down a little bit lower. Now, our next point is the belly button or the waist on a male. Generally, this is right above the navel, but you can always just kind of think of this as the belly button is somewhere around this area, and it's going to get you a pretty good depiction. You can also think about this as the midpoint of the back. Now, our next mark down is right above where you can see our little flower censor there. It's the pubic bone, and I want to be very specific about this. I know Flower's hiding it, but this is right above the male genitals here on the average figure. Now, the next one, pretty obvious, is the mid-thigh, and then we go to below the knee. This is a pretty important one because we don't get this one on females, so it's really nice to have this information. From there, we get the bottom of the calf. I like to think of this as 3/4 down the lower leg, personally. And then, of course, last we have the foot on the floor. Now, I was saying that the male was the easier one to start with. The reason being is you have 8 equal head sizes here, and this gives us something pretty important. That pubic bone line is actually a halfway point for our figure. So sometimes remembering all 8 of these or drawing 8 lines down your page every time is not realistic. But if you can kind of remember this and at least remember the halfway points and know everything else is in between those, it's a pretty good start. So at first glance, you might be a little confused saying, I don't know, these figures look pretty similar to each other in terms of height and stuff like that. Wouldn't it just line up exactly the same? Not exactly. Let's break this down. So with the female figure, if we take our head over and we bring this head down, we actually get Not 8, but 7.5 heads. Okay, and this isn't Flower being silly here. I'm being serious. It's a half a head. Now, the reason being for this is just on average, females tend to be shorter than males. Again, I'm going to sound like a parrot here, but again, I just want to say this is on average. Of course, there are women that are taller than men, and there's women that are shorter than the average female too, right? So again, this is just kind of based on the average proportions, and you can build off of there. Now, just like with the male figure, all of these head points line up with something. Now, the reason that I do say that the male is easier and the female is a little bit harder is because they don't line up perfectly with certain elements, as you'll see with the male, but it's pretty close. So starting off, everything is pretty much the same. So let's just go through this pretty quick. We know we got the top of the head, the chin, bottom of the neck, and then even the nipple line is similar, but we do want to be very aware of the fact that female have breasts and they come in different sizes, so this isn't always going to be an exact thing. Again, it's just a starting point. Now, more accurately here, the female's scapula does line up generally with this nipple line. And then of course we come to the belly button. This is basically the same so far, right? You're probably saying, Josh, what are you talking about? I think everything's gonna line up about the same, but right about from here is where things get a little different. This next line, the next headline, is the bottom of the pubic area, and if Flower wasn't there making that face, you would see that it literally is the bottom of the crotch. Now, if you're looking at the backside, this is where you get the bottom of the cheeks. I'm not trying to be funny. Okay, I'm trying to be a little funny here, but I just want you guys to remember that it's the bottom of the butt. And if we backstep one and we go up for the backside here, you'll notice that this part right here is the top of the pelvis. So this is literally where the bone of the pelvis starts. Now we jump down to that first leg line, and this is where things get a little weird. On the male figure, we had mid-thigh. Here we have just below mid-thigh. So this is where things kind of get up to interpretation. Similarly, we don't have the bottom of the knee mark. We're a little bit lower than the knee, so I kind of labeled it upper calf. You know, personally, I like to think of it as just, it's somewhere just maybe a quarter down the lower leg, just like, you know, like below the knee with an extra space. The next line is above the ankle. So this is generally where your ankle bones are going to line up, or it could sometimes be right above those ankle bones. And then that last half of the head, of course, brings us to where the foot touches the floor. So these differences do carry through to the halfway point. So if we throw the halfway points up here, you can see it's actually just above the bottom of the pubic area line. So a great way to know what this is where the great trochanter sticks out from the leg, essentially the starting point of your upper leg bone. On most people, you can notice a pretty good bump there. So this is all fine and dandy for finding the vertical, but what happens if we end up getting too wide with our figure? Is there a way to figure out width? I don't like to get too technical with it personally, but there is a way to kind of figure out shoulder length, and from here you can kind of determine the width of everything around after that. So let's switch it up. Let's start with the female figure here. We'll leave the male figure up. Now, if we take the head size and we go ahead and rotate this on its side, for the female figure, what we should have is 1.5 heads on the side to measure the shoulder width. So let's check this out. If I line that chin up there, if I could just copy this and drag it over, we should see that approximately we are looking at 1 full head and 1/2 of a head. Now with this, I want to say, of course, we have things like exaggeration. Generally speaking, for the female figure, the shoulder and the hips are going to about be the same width, but it doesn't hurt to sometimes play around here and have the hips go out a little bit bigger, just to kind of further exaggerate or accentuate that curved form. And we want to remember that some people do have wider hips and some people have more narrow hips. So again, you got to kind of play it to who you're drawing, what your character is. So let's apply this to the male figure. And now I have a feeling that some of you probably already put 2 and 2 together here to realize that the male shoulder to shoulder is going to be about 2 heads wide. Now, generally speaking, proportionally, we're supposed to think that the male's hips line up with the shoulder. I don't really think that this actually gets a good silhouette for a male figure, and generally I would say personally have the shoulder be the widest point to the male figure, it's just going to give them that kind of V taper shape, which we kind of associate with the male figure, at least when it comes to kind of athletic or superhero-like poses. Alright, and that is it for today. I know this one was a bit of an info dump, so I apologize that there wasn't really much drawing to do, but you could take this now and practice. And I'm going to make a video where I do that exact thing. We're going to take this exact thing I just taught and put it to practice. So I will see you guys in that next video. Thank you so much for watching this one. Please share this or any of my other videos with someone that you think it could help. And of course, it never hurts to hit that subscribe button. And trust me, you don't want flour on your bad side. I'll see you guys around.